And next up, we'll hear from Darren Zhu. Darren is a scientist and entrepreneur who previously co-founded and advised several synthetic biology companies. He's currently working on atoms.org, a Web3 research funding and publishing platform. Darren's going to take us beyond philanthropy to discuss incentives for funding public goods at scale. Welcome, Darren.
How's it going? And I'm actually joined here today with my collaborator and colleague, Lawrence Wu, who has been doing some crypto economic research with me. And as Carola mentioned, we're interested in thinking about mechanisms for funding public goods at scale beyond just philanthropic means. I'll let Lawrence kind of kick us off.
Absolutely. So why are we here? We're approaching a world in which marginal value is too cheap to meter. That means that we increasingly want to subsidize things, and we eventually want to subsidize beyond a level of the limits of generosity. So that's going to require us to flip the script and not rely just on asking people for money, but actually move to a world where people are actually asking to give. In this presentation, we're going to give two classes of tools which may be useful for amplifying the allocated power of these retroactive funding DAOs that we've been talking about throughout the day. And these classes are going to include memetic tools and economic tools.
And I'll start off with the memetic side. My friend Kevin Sumler wrote a great book with Robin Hanson, sort of discussing in one chapter sort of the underlying motives for donating to charity that go kind of beyond the altruistic. And really, it's about being driven by social status, whether it's visibility, peer pressure, proximity, or relatability. And we think actually NFTs are a pretty powerful primitive for kind of achieving what we call this degree of memetic altruism. They're both verifiable in terms of being a proof of donation, but also shareable as a form of proof of social status. And Vitalik, I guess now almost 4 years ago, during the Crypto Kitty wave back in 2017, pointed out that there would be an opportunity potentially to revive this idea of charity stickers to help incentivize and recognize and reward the people who are actually donating to public goods. While this primitive of NFTs doesn't actually address the allocation or adjudication issues of public goods funding, it does help address some of the social buy-in challenges that various folks, I know Owen mentioned it earlier, for trying to get something like an impact market started. And so this is sort of what we've gotten excited about is, as Carola mentioned, we are interested in working on building a platform for funding science research at scale with various sort of crypto native primitives. And I just wanted to highlight there are some, I guess, non-crypto native analog NFTs in the past that have been used to amplify how science is funded, whether that was the Livestrong bracelets in the early 2000s as a memetic token for raising over $100 million for funding cancer research, or the Ice Bucket Challenge more recently as a sort of proto NFT for funding ALS research. Clearly, there are powerful tools for getting individuals excited and activated to fund research. And so what we've been building are essentially these NFT donor badges that are awarded to contributors to public goods funding. It's a much less exclusionary mechanism compared to existing projects that have funded public goods either through charity or selling a limited series of NFTs. In this case, contributors can donate at the level that they feel comfortable at, and then we can actually sort of calibrate the NFT they receive based on some sort of contribution score, where we can add something like referrals to that contribution score to actually amplify the awareness and the funding of these projects, maximally speaking, compared to auctions where bidders are sort of often incentivized to try to minimize competitors and spread the project less so. So this NFT donor badge system can sort of serve as primitive for other downstream financial incentives, which we're excited about creating sort of an ecosystem to further the social buy-in to something like this. And also they can be useful for establishing and aligning norms where these various high impact projects can receive sort of ideally the best financial rewards, whether those are airdrop rewards where you can imagine art where the sort of scarcity or rarity or desirability of it scales with the contribution score, where you can imagine coupons being awarded scaled for the various contributors to these public goods projects. Vitalik has written a bit about sort of this concept of marginal price discrimination, where I guess in our analog world today, we have discounts for veterans or AAA holders in America. You could extend that digitally where organizations, maybe you could get an ENS domain for free as somebody who's donated certain public goods projects. And obviously the last sort of downstream financial incentive would be secondary sales. And this mirrors some of the earlier discussions on certificate of impact markets, as Paul Cristiano in his sort of 2015 experiment on impact purchases showed. You can imagine building a sort of robust secondary market for some of these NFT badges, although that will require probably quite a bit of memetic engineering to get a secondary market up. So those are some quick examples. We've also been prototyping a prize ourselves that would essentially leverage this usage of NFTs to encourage people to crowdfund new prizes. In this case, this would be sort of a retroactive crowdfunded prize for the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine researchers that we're hoping to launch soon. We've been embroiled in some TradFi and tax bottlenecks, but I'll hand it off to Lawrence, who will talk briefly about some economic incentives for prospectively crowdfunding and amplifying prizes.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and talk about some additional economic ways that we can increase leverage and also improve allocative efficiency. So let's assume this sort of retroactive prize market setup that other talks have covered, where you have post-impact, you have the DAO giving impact proportional rewards to projects. And you also have speculators who are advance financing these projects in order to gain exposure to these prizes. Maybe that market is stacked with some of the memetic features that we mentioned. So now in this setup, you might imagine that an investor would seek more exposure to a project than a project is targeting to raise. What we could do is we could capture this excess and we could redirect it from speculative projects towards realized impact. And that will leverage returns on impact and create bigger rewards for those who impact in more impactful projects. Something additional we can do on top of that is introduce a medium of exchange for the priority fee and the impact prize. This could give us an asset plus an exchange rate, which would be useful for altruists and businesses alike in terms of offsetting impact. And it will also be useful for speculators to set their bid, knowing that one impact corresponds to $1 of social benefit. Finally, another way that we can recover money for the protocol is to unlock part of the prize for the team at some milestone. And so there's some literature on this where if you don't unlock all the upside until you reach a milestone, for example, like you can imagine like Elon Musk gets more stock, right? This actually happens. Elon Musk gets more stock when Tesla goes past certain milestones of stock price. You can have this sort of discontinuity where the team unlocks part of the prize after a milestone. But if you do this, you end up with unaccounted for prize money. And so we can recycle this difference back into the protocol. And so in that particular case, we would amplify again how much we reallocate money from ineffective projects to effective projects and further leverage the return on impact.
And I think that's pretty much everything that we've got wrapped up here.
Yeah, we have time actually for a few questions. And I think the first has to do with the Adams Prize. How did you decide what your first prize target would be? And how do you think prize targeting will work going forward?
Yeah, for the first one, I think it was important to find something that was sort of broadly important and applicable to society. And there was sort of also this, in our opinion, a missed opportunity for the Nobel Prize Foundation this year to respond quickly to something like this. I think, and so in some ways, it was centrally decided, as I guess some of these, many of these early retroactive public goods funding projects are. But I think in the future, we could and should open it up in terms of how those prizes are determined. You could imagine various schemes for identifying who should and could be the awardees. So that's something we're still figuring out right now. But I think to sort of start off, we just kind of want to test this mechanism for crowdfunding new prizes in a more straightforward way.
Thanks to Darren and Lawrence for giving us a new perspective on prizes.